How's it going, everybody? It's Ryan going to talk to you about shoulder mobility, specifically overhead mobility. And why am I obsessing over overhead mobility? Well, it's probably the most important mobility. It's actually the expression of full range of motion in the shoulder, because you're either having trouble getting your hands over your head without breaking somewhere in the spine or shoulders, or you're having trouble going to extension, which is more for the bottom part of a bench press. That will be addressed later in another video, but today is about overhead because it's the problem that most people have. So you can see me here. Earlier you just saw me doing some shrugs, kind of reaching up for the barbell. The purpose of that was sort of get a feel and a test for what was tight and stiff. And then you see me here using a band to use a PVC pipe to kind of hold my body back. And this is something that's very effective in improving your chest flexibility, your shoulder flexibility. The one thing I do find with this particular movement that's very helpful is that when you hold real tight and you kind of focus on shrugging and externally rotating the shoulders, you allow for a greater stretch in the biceps and the chest. And more importantly, actually try to help improve the muscle activation in the position, or in this case, what I'm trying to do is improve external rotation for overhead squat or snatches, but can be easily applied to overhead press. Now here you can see me doing an external rotation stretch, trying to mimic a front squat or front rack position. And I'm just using the PVC pipe to lever on my hand. There's multiple ways to do it. You can see me here, I just adjusted, and what I did was I positioned the PVC pipe under my armpit versus lining up with my forearm. And that simply just kind of provides a little bit different position. I actually like this particular stretch for getting ready for back squats. Because sometimes, the chest muscles are tight, shoulders get real stiff, and it's really hard to get that bar behind your back without having your elbows flared so much. Now, I do realize a lot of you are not interested in doing an overhead squat. Some of you might, I don't know, it depends on who's watching this video. Maybe it's later down the road from when I published it, but an overhead squat is a good way to assess people's flexibility, shortcomings, range of motion. So if you can do an overhead squat, it means that you can move pretty good and you're not going to have too much restriction. Now you can see me here doing a test with a PVC pipe, and you kind of see my lower back do a little reverse snake there. That's essentially a butt wink, but it's actually worse than a butt wink. It's probably a very terrible butt wink because my spine is shearing against the load. This is probably not that big of a deal because there's not much load, and I'm in pretty good health. Now, I don't know if you noticed it there. You can saw that I was a little irritated, or looks like a little grumpy. I don't know what it is. Maybe I was pissed off. I can't exactly remember. I think I just stretched a bunch and I felt like there was no change and it still hurt. So sometimes I get real frustrated with this kind of stuff. So someone had requested that I do some anatomy stuff and point it up and put it up on here. And here you go, because this is a great visual. If you look at this is the lat. You can see where the black arrow is pointed. I got this from Google search. And you can see that white area, which is the thoracic lumbar fascia, which is where it connects to. And then you can kind of see how the lat inserts into the front of the arm or front of the humerus. And that's the reason why I'm trying to turn my palm up, because when you turn the palm up, you move the insertion away from the origin. The origin is where that white stuff is on the back. And the insertion is where the insertion point. The difference between the insertion and the origin is simply the insertion is the area that moves the most. So the chest, the origin of the chest is the sternum, and the insertion is the humerus. So the part that moves the most is typically the insertion. So what we got here next is me doing a retest, checking to see if it actually made a change, and it did make a change, because now you can see me adjusting myself to switching to the opposite side. Trying to figure out what's tight and feel the muscles stretch. I know that sounds obvious, but after you stretch, you test, and you have to affirm that what you're doing is working. Otherwise, why would you even do it? So this is one of the main reasons why I do the overhead shrug, or why I've been doing them lately, is that I'm missing a lot of upward rotation. That's the reason why I'm not able to get full flexion in the shoulder. The one biggest reason that makes this so difficult is, if you see here, the picture I've put up is the pec minor. Attaches to the scapula, the shoulder blade. I think that's a coracoid process. I can't remember, but it attaches to the rib cage and attaches to the shoulder blade. So when I'm reaching up like that, my pec minor is one of the major muscles, along with the lats and other muscles, restricted, because that's clavicle moves up, so you can see me. I don't know if you noticed that my right knee buckled there just a second. You'll probably see another one later, but the thing is to understand is that the reason why I'm having this issue is because that pec minor is super, super tight. And that's kind of why, again, like I said, the reason why I like this stuff and why I'm doing the overhead squat, first of all, it's a freaking hard exercise, right? It's also a pretty amazing exercise for something that's within the realms of what I can do. Like, honestly, like things, if I could do them and I felt like I had a chance to do, would be like a backflip or the splits or like heavy Olympic lifting. I'm very far from doing any of that. But going back to my topic here, talking about mobility. So continuing the overhead shrugs, I keep turning my head, which is probably not ideal because you don't usually want to do that when your hands are overhead with resistance even. But the one thing to understand, the reason why I'm doing this is just, I'm watching myself, is trying to get a sense for if everything's in the right spot. Like I'm checking my lower back position. I'm trying to tuck my you can see my shorts, or my butt's eating my shorts, is because trying to roll my hips underneath and squeeze my glutes. And then after doing shrugs, I'm doing reverse shrugs. Again, continuing to help solidify the motor pattern. I'm trying to keep my glutes tight. I'm trying to find a position with my hips, which is sort of challenging in this position. Not everybody has the stability and strength to control their pelvis and lower back while hanging. Okay, so next up I have external rotation with some elbow flexion and shoulder flexion, trying to improve external rotation while flexion in the shoulder. So one way to remember shoulder flexion, in case you are sort of trying to learn the terminology, is that if you're in anatomical position, so anatomical position, if you remember sort of the Da Vinci perfect man circle, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but if you don't, just imagine standing with your palms facing in front of you with your hands to your side. That's anatomical position. And generally, pretty much almost everything, that anytime your hand moves forward or your legs move forward or you kick your leg forward, that is flexion. So the only exception is the knee. In order for if you're standing in an anatomical position, the knee has to go back behind you to flex. That's how I remembered it. So if your head has to push forward, that means you're getting flexion in the neck. There's probably more nuances, but that's just essentially, that pretty much helps you remember everything. If you're sort of dyslexic like me, or sort of like get things backwards wrong a lot of the time, that has worked a ton for me. So I think flexion, extension, external rotation. I always imagine the picture of being in an anatomical position and then doing the movement. Now going back to what I'm doing here, I'm just trying to improve external rotation in the shoulder. That way when I put my hands overhead, I'm able to get some activation and strength from those muscle fibers. And in this case, it will be the rotator cuff muscles, also the rear delts as well. All right, so we're back here again to the banded overhead stretch with the PVC pipe. I kind of want to do some closing thoughts on flexibility and mobility with everything that I've done. You see me do a lot of videos on this stuff. I talk about it often. The one thing you got to realize is that it's going to take a lot of time, and it's not the stretching that matters. Stretching is like, I'm stretching, but it's not really that good. Let me rephrase that. I mean, it's good if you're going to train, right? But if you want something to be permanent, you're going to have to be able to train in that range of motion. And that's really a lot what most of it is. Since I stretched out and I've been rolling a lot more, what's happening is my shoulders have been on fire. They've been sore all week because I'm able to tap into this new range of motion. And that's how you're going to keep mobility permanent. You're only going to keep permanent what you practice. So you got to practice it, and you got to practice the movement. And more importantly, not so much practice as in like, okay, stretch yourself into range of motion. Really what you have to do is you have to mobilize enough so you can get to that range of motion or get close, and then use the weight and resistance to sort of push you over a little bit, because then that way the muscles at those end ranges where you do not have normal range, where you typically don't have range of motion, you only get it after you stretch or roll, or a combination of both. That's what's going to make it permanent, because you're really grooving a pattern. Your body wants to stick to doing certain things because that's what it does. It wants to stay a certain way. And if you are in a chair all day long and you sit in front of a computer, you start to look like it. That's just what happens. And if you want to be a big bencher and you bench 3 to 4 days a week, or you bench often, you're going to look like a bencher, And if you want to overhead press and snatch, and you want to overhead squat, you're going to look like that. You're going to have the range of motion for that. So a lot of it is just training those ranges of motion. And then I'm showing you stuff to free that movement. Now you can see me here. You'll see in some other stuff coming up, if you haven't seen it already, is me rolling out tissue. And this is probably the more important thing to do. If you roll your tissues every day and you train, the stretching is really sort of a short-term fix, where the rolling is actually the more important fact when it comes to training. It's the most important because that's what allows you to use your muscles better, like I said in the beginning. Stretching just makes it so that you can get there sooner, but it's really more about the rolling, at least in my experience. And I cannot emphasize this enough. You got to retest. You see stretches on other videos, on other channels, and other foam rolling techniques, and you're going to learn that there's going to be a few things that's going to help you the best. And no matter how many videos you watch or things that you see, it's not going to be until you test it and try it out to see if there's a change. You have to be able to test and find out what works for you. If you're getting some change and improvement, you keep doing that mobility drill. I'm telling you right now, based on my experience, based on my problems, if I roll in a lacrosse ball, like I'm doing here, or if I'm going to roll in a foam roller on my triceps and my lats, that has a much greater impact on my overall mobility than stretching does. My pec minor locks my shoulder girdle down. It gives me problems. It seems to be that rolling is more beneficial to my issues. You might be the same, you might be different, but you won't know until you test. So if you have a question or a comment, leave one below. I will help you out. I put some anatomy pictures in here because someone requested I talk more about the anatomy. And again, continue to comment because it will allow me to help create better content for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.